All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our first official week event of Success in STEM Week. My name is Katie Morton, and I am the program coordinator for supplemental instruction with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion's Scholarship and Supplemental Academic Services Unit. We're really excited to kick this week off with our Ask an Expert panel with some of our really awesome students. So tonight, we're going to give you the opportunity to talk with some of our current OSU students who serve as our peer educators and tutors within our office and have found success within their own STEM courses. You're going to have an opportunity to ask your own questions at the end. So if anything comes up at any point during our discussion, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will circle back to any of your questions at the end. As a reminder, before we get started, this event and all of our other events this week are going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So if you miss anything or want to go back and review some content later, that will all be available for you. So we're going to get started by introducing our wonderful panelists. So if you all could give me your name, your role within SSAS, so tutor or SI leader, what your major is, and what your future aspirations are in the world of STEM. So India, we will start with you.
Hi, I'm India Carter. I'm a third year at OSU neuroscience major. I tutor for neuroscience and psychology classes.
All right, and we will have Veronica share next.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I am a senior. I'm pursuing a dual degree in molecular genetics and psychology. As far as my career aspirations, I really want to attend medical school to become a doctor.
Awesome, thank you. I don't know if I see Henry in here yet. Maybe not. All right, so then Nemo, I will pass it over to you.
Hi, I'm Nemo. I'm a STEM education major, so high school math and college mathematics education professor major. I tutor currently, or specifically I'm a supplemental instruction leader for SI through ODI. And then the goal is to be a teacher.
All righty, thank you all for sharing. So the way this is going to work is I have a list of questions that I'll be asking our panelists. But like I mentioned, if anything comes up that you're wondering about and you want to ask, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll circle back to them later. So panelists, if you can just share your thoughts on these questions in the same order we did introductions, that will be great. So our first question, so we'll put it off to India first. So thinking back to your first year as a college student, what did you find most challenging about adjusting to college classes and kind of, you know, the difference between studying for college classes versus maybe what you did in high school and how you kind of overcame those challenges?
Yeah, so my first year of undergrad, I think I had the most trouble finding a good work-life balance. I was just so paranoid and kind of worried about the fact that maybe I wouldn't find time to study, or I would prioritize like going out too much or going to see my friends too much. And I think I ended up overcompensating that first semester, my first year. I would spend like days in the library before I would step out and like go get lunch with my friends or see people. And I quickly realized that I was like extremely exhausted after that, burnt out. It was just not a healthy way to go about that your first year. So I would really say after I learned that I needed a balanced diet, like more than just protein bars and chicken nuggets from Scott, I also needed to like go and see my friends, prioritize that, make sure that I had contact with my different support systems, whether it be like your advisor, your life coach, at OSU, they offer those, or your family. Reaching out to different types of support groups really helped. And just making sure that even though you know, there's study rooms all around you, libraries, you know, walking to class everywhere, to really make sure that, you know, you're a person, you need to breathe, you need to step back, prioritize you as well, because that matters, especially in a busy environment like school. So I wish that I had prioritized that more when I was a first year student, first semester.
Okay, so I guess I'll go next. So I had a similar issue with trying to find the balance between school and also having fun. Coming in from, I'm out of state, so I'm from the Chicago area, so I didn't really know a lot of people, but living at Morrill, I knew a lot of people because there's a lot of suite mates and stuff. But it was hard because everyone had different schedules, and I feel like with that many suite mates, I kept getting pulled out to do like, going out, even though I maybe shouldn't have. So I guess finding that balance, making sure that I have the right amount of practice with my classes, going to the library, and then also like having fun, because both things are equally as important.
And as I can go. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is my first year. I remember having too much free time in a way, if I look at it, because we're normally used to a Monday, Friday schedule where we're in school and class every single day. And then my first semester here, I only had class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then like 2 classes on Tuesday, Thursday. So it was really weird for me. And I remember there were times on Friday night, even I forgot to do coursework because we just didn't have like a set schedule. So some things I made moving forward just was setting a schedule in forms of now on Tuesdays. I actually have only one class currently, but that's normally when I'm doing most of my work. So on Tuesdays from like 9 a.m. to 3 in the afternoon, I'm just studying or completing all my homework for the week. That way I could make sure I have that extra free time to go hang with friends.
So thank you all for sharing that. So our next question is, thinking about your coursework and specifically your STEM classes, what did you find most challenging to be about those when you started at OSU?
So for me, what I found most difficult was chemistry. I'm sure that most people have heard chemistry horror stories, not even just at OSU, but everywhere. And I do want to say those horror stories are true if you try to tackle it alone, which is almost impossible, I think, if you're not like a chem connoisseur coming in here. But once I had figured out that there was a homework lab or like a working lab in the back of Celeste's laboratory, things got extremely easier to understand. I was picking up material faster. I felt like I had a better support with chemistry. And the biggest thing with that homework lab is that the TAs are there to help you. Like that's their designated time to come in and help you with chemistry. So even if you think your question is dumb or rudimentary or simple, like it is absolutely not. It is completely acceptable to ask any questions in there. They will help you with like the most basic of questions, basic material. So if you just need to catch up or on a specific homework material, like that was my godsend. I went in there probably like at least 4 times a week. And I never had to stress about lab reports anymore, homework, anything like that, because there was always someone willing to like help me sit down and understand the material. So those chemistry horror stories kind of like quickly dissipated after that. Super helpful.
Okay, so for me, I'd say the hardest part about the STEM classes was also like chemistry and biology, that type of stuff. It was really hard to manage both chemistry and biology in my first semester freshman year. But basically, I just think to overcome all of the knowledge that we have to memorize is just by running through it every day, trying to practice, and then also utilizing the resources. Going to office hours, going to TA office hours was really helpful. Usually, I feel like the professor office hours are like, there's only like 1 day a week, but TA office hours are very expansive, especially with chemistry. So utilizing that, especially with like lab and stuff as well, was really helpful.
Yeah, I think so. My early courses, because I'm trying to think, the most difficult for me, because I only actually had to take like one science course truly, which was biology. And for me, because I didn't take a lot of science in high school either, because I focused on math, it was just trying to understand those early topics as they're speeding through it. Like you're supposed to already know this in a way. So I remember having to go back into the book and use the book as a learning source for myself and just make sure, yeah, they may be 3 chapters ahead, but take my own time and do the chapters I know I can do. And eventually you'll catch up.
Awesome. And I think I saw Henry pop in here. So Henry, if you want to introduce yourself real quick and then tell us what you found to be most challenging about starting out with your STEM classes at OSU.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, guys. Yeah, my name's Henry Tennant. I'm a 5th year here at OSU, majoring in earth sciences. I apologize. I was having a bit of a technical issue trying to connect to the Zoom call. Always seems to be my luck with these things. But anyway, The thing I found most challenging starting off in my first year as a STEM major. So I think it was just the sheer like number of things I had to do, right? Because I remember this one semester I was taking like physics 1, calc 1, and gen chem 1. It was kind of terrible. I don't know why I did that. Bad decision looking back at it. So it just felt like every day I had an assignment. I constantly had to do everything all at once. So one thing I would say is really going to be your best friend starting off in college, if you're in a similar boat, maybe you have a lot of work you have to get done in a day, is a calendar. Like honest, and it sounds so simple, but I feel like a lot of students don't utilize just if it's a calendar on your phone, if it's Google Calendar, iCal, whatever it is, slot in everything you have to do in the week. Your classes, your assignments, when those assignments are due, any club meetings, like really figure out when you have free time and how you can maximize that time. And the best way to do that is just organize your calendar, make sure you have a schedule. And this is the most important part, stick to that schedule day in and day out. As long as you stick to that schedule, you'll usually find that you can kind of stay, afloat and stay ahead. So yeah.
All right, so next question, since you all are the tutoring and SI experts, can you think about maybe a common challenge or something you see a lot of the students you work with running into in relation to being successful in STEM classes, and what advice you tend to give the students that you work with?
Yeah, so I tutor for neuroscience and psychology classes. And the biggest problem that I see students having, and something that I definitely struggled with a little bit coming in, was being able to piece together all the little bits of information. I know when I was learning neuroscience and psychology in the beginning, I think it's still this way. It's a lot of like slide after slide of these little bits of information that at the end, tell an entire story about some neurological process in the brain. And I think the trouble is that it's so much information, they don't really seem to go together when they're pieced apart in those slides until you put it together on like a big whiteboard. Or for me, what I did is take like a big piece of sketchbook paper and write out kind of like I forget what they're called, but brainstorm clouds almost, like putting down all the details and being able to visually connect the dots is really what allowed me to see the bigger picture of what I was learning. And that makes it a lot easier to relate to the little details when they come up on exams or like assignments and stuff like that. You're able to think back to the bigger idea and how those little details fit in. So really for me, I'm a visual person. Learning how you like to learn is a big deal, so that you can come back and be able to digest all the information that comes with psychology and neuroscience, and honestly, any STEM class.
So I mainly teach chemistry, whether it's Gen Chem or OChem or elementary chem. I think the biggest issue that I see is just how much information there is. Like, especially when you come in directly from high school, it is such a difference. Like when you have 3 midterms and then all of that information that's compiled and they teach it, maybe 3 times a week. So I think that would be the biggest challenge. And then overcoming that would probably be, I just tell my tutees to really just like practice every day. So I myself try to write down all of the stuff that I learned from the lecture that day, like whether it's on my iPad or like in a notebook or something. And then every day I just go through it, because memorizing and practicing is just the way to do better on a test, because when you see the concepts more, you memorize them more. And then also, obviously, getting help on the specific questions. So asking me as the tutor to help them, which has been helping.
Pick them up. Yeah, so I actually am an SI for Math 1075, but I've also SI'd for Math 1148 and seen a lot of the math subjects for tutoring. And the biggest thing I like to see is they tend to skip steps. If like feeling they already know it, they just skip the step, but because of that, they're gonna mess a number up or a problem up within it. So one thing I tend to tell my tutorees, especially when they're initially learning the subject, is not to skip those steps, even though they may know it, and write it out. So that way they can make sure they see it in addition to when they're doing the work for an exam or homework, they still get points in case they do mess up on a later step. because a lot of the times, especially in math, we tend to give you a point for each of the proper steps instead of just the actual answer itself.
I would say so. I'm also a math tutor along with Nemo. We're both in the SI program for math. And one thing I see a lot in 1151, I would say, because that's mostly what I've been tutoring for the last few semesters, is a kind of a lack of confidence I see in students. So a lot of times people will walk in with a problem and they'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not really sure. And they'll have the correct solution like right there. And I'm like, no, you're right. Like you have to kind of believe in yourself and believe that you are doing this correctly. And I think one thing that kind of happens on a macro scale is that, they kind of hear on camp like, oh, Calc 1's tough or whatever, right? They kind of psych themselves out before they even enter the classroom. And then that kind of trickles into their work, and they kind of get this self-doubt and this lack of confidence. But no, there have been a lot of times where I'll be tutoring someone and I'll be like, well, what's the solution? Like what do we do from here? And they'll have it. They're one line at a time. They'll know exactly what they're doing. And then they'll kind of be like, well, that was easy. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is. If you have the right mental mindset going into it, it will be easier over time. So I think that's one thing is, know when you're at your limit, right? Know your weaknesses, but also at times be confident, right? If it makes sense to you, you're probably doing it right. So I think confidence is a big thing too that I see early on.
All right, and next question, you all just kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you can give us your best study tips for your science and math courses.
Yeah, so I think I actually have a couple points on this one that really helped me. Someone already mentioned this, but for planners, like this is my planner. It's smaller than my iPad. It just sticks in my purse or my backpack, like wherever I go. I can kind of show you like one page inside of it. So I can circle all my like midterm stuff, my meetings, when I'm working, when I'm tutoring. And super specifically, the specific advice I have about this is at the end of all your syllabi for each class is usually a course schedule. So as someone mentioned before, like going in and adding all your assignments on that course schedule, you'll be able to go day by day and just write it out for each of your classes. And that way you'll never be paranoid about when your assignments and midterms are coming up. It's like you said, it's my best friend. I don't think I could survive without my planner. And then in a more general sense for helping with homework and studying is to never be afraid to ask for help. I think most people here probably aren't afraid to ask for help because they're coming to like seminars and meetings like this, which is really proactive and great. But really, I am surprised almost each time I ask for help and how willing people are to help you in most situations when it comes to school. TAs are always willing to help. People around you want to also make study groups and help each other learn. Your professors are there to help you. Just in a really extreme version of this, just as an example, for last year, I was struggling with an OChem assignment. I think I just misunderstood one part of the lecture and I didn't understand this particular material. So I got a 0 on that assignment. It was pretty big for our grade. And I went back to the professor. I just emailed him and I was like, hey, I felt really confident about this assignment. I studied for it. I thought I understood the material, but I think I'm confused on XYZ. Is there any extra credit or another assignment I could do? And the next day he ended up reopening the assignment, a different question, but the same assignment. And I got 100% on it. So just never be afraid to ask for help. Sounds kind of cliche, but you would really be surprised how much people are willing to help you.
So I'd say the biggest study tip as far as tests go is just to find the time to study in the first place. So utilizing your planner, like literally putting it in your calendar saying from this time to this time, I am putting that time to study for the specific class. And obviously when there's many midterms for different classes, you have to know how to make it the best. So like every day, maybe like a couple hours in one class, a couple hours in the other class. And then for the more specific things, I look at what chapters are going to be on the midterm, and then I basically start in the beginning and go through all of my notes. I take out all the resources I have, whether that's like my book and then plus the notability stuff, plus the stuff online, like anything possible. And then I just write down all the stuff, like all the concepts, whether that be on my iPad or in a notebook. Because honestly, writing really helps me remember. So when I write it again over and over, it makes me like more practice, obviously. And then when I see a concept that I just don't understand, that's when I reach out for my resources, like asking the teacher, going to office hours, going to ask your TA as well. Like everyone is there to help. So that's really helpful.
I can go. So to use this, I kind of actually had an exam this week. So some of the things I'm going to be using this week is just for tonight, I'm studying for an hour and I'm going to do in bits and pieces rather than doing all at once for 8 hours. Because when you're studying for 8 hours, you're actually going to lose a lot of that information because you're just cramming it instead of actually learning it or relearning it. So for me this week, I'm studying for an hour, and then tomorrow I'll be studying for 4 hours. I won't be studying the 4 hours straight. I'll do like an hour in the morning. I'll go to my classes, what I have, and then maybe do a couple more hours in chunks. And then in addition to that, I'm also using the resources we got from ODI. So I, a couple weeks back, emailed the tutoring group here and got practice exams from old semesters that I can use now to go through and look at those questions of what kind of questions am I going to see, or what kind of questions should I prepare myself for.
So I'll be honest, Nemo kind of stole my answer there. So I'll try and think of something real quick. So I think specifically when you're looking at the kind of lower level math courses, right? So maybe you're like, 1000s and you're low 2000 levels. And then as well as your physical sciences as well. So your physics, your chemistry, all those sort of things. The best thing you can do is learn by doing, right? So especially with math, you can sit there and you can write your formulas out and that's great. You can take notes on that. But if you're not actually applying them, if you're not really like getting down and doing problems, you're gonna have a hard time when it comes to the midterms. So one thing I really suggest doing is in all of your classes, try and scout ahead online. And this is where you can ask TAs, you can ask people like ODI tutors like us for those resources so that you can gather those problems. So that way you have a nice pool of problems that when midterm season comes up and you need to study, you can pull problems from there and you can just do one after another after another. I know when specifically thinking about Calc 1, when we were doing the derivative section and we were learning about, I don't know, maybe this might be going above some people's head if you haven't taken Calc 1, but product, chain, and quotient rule, I learned those just by doing them. Just like one derivative problem after another, after another, after another. And I think for a lot of those lower level math courses, that's just how you have to do it. Just grinding out problems. So really try and build a pool of problems and then just sit there and you just got to do them. And it's work and it sucks, but you just gotta grind through it.
All right. Okay, something has happened with my computer screen. I don't think you can see what I was sharing anymore, but can you all hear me okay? Okay, I have my second laptop up that hopefully will help with that. So apologies that the PowerPoint's not showing anymore, but we can keep moving along with this. So our next question is going to be a scenario-based one. So if a student comes to you either as a tutoring appointment or in your SI session, and they just got a failing grade on a quiz for the course they're coming to see you about, what would be your next steps in helping the student work through that and the advice that you might give them?
Yeah, I would probably offer, like an empathetic ear. I would want someone just to kind of console me in that moment, because I know that can really be a hard thing to go through, especially in your first year if you're not used to that from high school, or perhaps this is like more challenging work. And so typically what I do in this situation for neuroscience and psychology classes is they're able to see their old quizzes and midterms and the questions that they perhaps got wrong after they're released. So usually we'll go over those and I'll ask like, okay, like what did you not understand about this section, or do you want to go over this part? So I would usually focus on the questions that we got wrong and recap any information. And usually when it comes to like the second or third midterms, missing questions on those is because we didn't understand a certain topic all the way back from like week 1 or 2. So if you just get 1 or 2 things flip-flop from that week 1 or 2, 3 or 4 material flip-flopped, that can kind of skew your material for midterms 3 and 4 or 2 and 3. So really recapping that old information is really key to understanding any new material that we're coming up, or kind of fill in those gaps where maybe a little bit fell through on there. So really going over that midterm, seeing where we can start from the beginning is usually how I would do that.
So similar to India, I would first try to console them as best as possible. Obviously with chemistry is hard regardless. Like, you're not alone if you fail. Everyone's been there, I've been there. It's really hard, right? And the teachers know that it's hard. So it's not that crazy. I just try to emphasize that it's like, it's not just you, like it's a hard class. And obviously like the averages are never really high either, right? So you're not in it alone. And then similar to what India said as well, is that I try to go back in the concepts of that first midterm, because all the new concepts really pile on the old ones. Like, you're not gonna know how to do like stuff for the third midterm if you don't understand dimensional analysis from the first midterm. So it's really important to just go back, understand where where they sort of went wrong in the first place, and then try to correct that so then they don't make those mistakes later.
Yeah, kind of what they both just said. The start is just making sure they understand they're not alone and it's a difficult class. Actually, currently, I'm in a class right now where a D at the end of the semester is still going to be considered an A, because that's how difficult the course is. And they want you to gain as much content as possible. So like reminding them that the content is actually difficult in a way that they understand that they won't be alone in so much struggles. And then going back to that exam or that question and going through the practice problems and identifying the mistakes they made within the problem, because those are going to be the key pieces that we need to build upon for the next exam and the next exam.
Yeah, so kind of building on what everyone else has said, the first thing you got to do is kind of give them some perspective. First off, it was a quiz, right? If I remember the exact wording of the thing correctly, right? So it's, if you had to fail anything in a class, I'd rather it be one quiz out of probably a dozen rather than one midterm out of potentially 3 that really affects your grade, right? So it's just a quiz, and that's great. And like everyone has said, you're probably in a very difficult class, right? Chem 1210, Math 1151, these are difficult classes. The other thing too is like, I would always be interested to know is, well, what are you defining as failure, right? Because if you asked, freshman Henry, right, what's failure, I'd probably tell you like anything that isn't an A. And now here I am 4 years later, and I'm like, is it above average or below average? Below average, okay, that's probably still failing, right? So it's giving them that perspective. And then on top of that, you got to find the root cause. So let's say, you failed this, but you got like a 50 or whatever, right? It's like, well, there could be many, many reasons why you failed that, right? Was it just a lack of effort, right? In that case, it's just, you got to, sit down, you got to study the material, right? Is it test anxiety? Okay, well, that's more of a psychological thing. You got to think about that for the next one. Is it really just minor mistakes, right? Because especially in a math exam, things can snowball, right? And they do give you partial credit, but if you make a mistake way up here, everything below it is just going to be off the mark, right? So it's then just root cause identification, right? And trying to figure out, well, where did the failure begin? And then fixing it at that point.
All right, awesome. Thank you all. So our next scenario, you did not follow all of this great advice you've been sharing all night and forgot to mark your exam date on your calendar. And now it's 2 days before the exam. How would you proceed with studying to make the most of your time? So what would be your plan of attack in that situation?
I have been in that situation before. I don't know if I did the best thing for it, but now what I would do, usually my exams go by like chapters of information. So what I've done in the past, and currently what I just did for this past biochem exam, is break down my time into chapters. So I think Nemo probably mentioned this before, where he'll study like for an hour in the morning and then some after his classes. If I were cramming for 2 days before a test, I would probably break it down by like morning hours studies, after lunch hours study, and then after dinner hours studying. Probably giving myself like 3 hours each time, maybe 2 hours to do that. So I would just break it down like chapter 4 through 5. I'm going to reread this, do lectures. I don't know if you guys have heard of the app Notability, but on there I make, and you can do this in your regular notes app too. I think they have the checklist option, but I just, for each time, making myself a checklist, like read chapter 4.1, then chapter 4.3, listen to this lecture, and then do this practice exam. So if I have a checkbox next to each one of those and I break it down for each period that I'm studying, it seems a lot easier for me to tackle, because all I have to do in that period of that studying is exactly what's on my checklist. I don't have to look at the rest of tomorrow and the rest of today's studying. I just have to do these 4 things within this checklist during this period of time that I'm studying. So any way that I can break it down into chunks and make it fun to check off, like release a little dopamine each time I check it off, makes it a lot easier to tackle if I were having to cram that quick.
So if you only have 2 days to cram, I guess it would really just depend on how prepared you felt, or like how much knowledge that you gained from, like, when like attending class and stuff. So if you really don't feel confident in the class and you only have 2 days to study, I would say that obviously you have to look at the main topics in order to do the best like on the test. So if you don't know anything in the class, then I would say like look in the syllabus, look in the main things that were taught, and then just get an overall understanding. And like India said, like make specific times in the day where you study specific chapters. And obviously if you only have 2 days, maybe try to skip the chapters that you already know and then focus more on the ones that you don't know. But obviously if you've been attending lecture, like studying sort of throughout the whole time, then that would be a better instance. But with 2 days, try to cram the main concepts in.
Okay, so if you only had 2 days to study, one of the main things I want to do is like communication. Communicate with your professor or communicate with your friends so they can help you come up with other ideas of things that they know were difficult, either they've already taken the class or they're in the class with you that were difficult to them, so you can see that. And then in addition, if you're looking at 2 days, normally the professors posted a practice exam and posted a list of the key topics you need to know for this exam, and you can use that to create your checklist. So in that first hour, like India was talking about, or I was talking about earlier, you could say, I only want to do these 2 topics from my study guide. And then the next hour, these 2 topics, and keep going from there.
Yeah, so assuming that you've been taking regular notes, you've been attending lecture, all of that stuff, you've probably at this point between your last midterm and this midterm, you've probably done a lot of assignments, right? Quizzes, homeworks, right? Maybe labs if it's like a physics class too. So the thing I would do is take inventory, go back there and circle the problems that you struggled with, or maybe you thought you did well, but you received low points on them, right? And let that be your study guide then, right? If you say like, okay, since I have midterm 3 coming up in 2 days, since midterm 2, we've covered topics X, Y, and Z. I did really good on the homework for X. I did really good on the quiz for Y, but man, was I bad for the topic Z, right? So you focus with Z and you start studying that, and then maybe you prioritize from there. So take inventory, look back at previous assignments, figure out this was my weakest point. Start there, and then work back until you get to your strongest point last.
All right, and then last question I have on my list for all of you is, outside of the classroom, is there anything you all are involved in that's helped kind of support your learning in STEM? So whether that's jobs or internships or clubs, anything like that.
Yeah, so I totally forgot to mention this when I introduced myself, but I am also on the pre-med path, hoping to go to medical school to become a neurologist. So I am part of a research lab down at IBMR building. It's the Stress and Health OSU lab, and that has actually really helped me with kind of learning more about neuroscience and more like specific neuroscience research and stuff like that. I'm also part of a pre-medical fraternity called Phi Delta Epsilon, and they helped so much with the pre-medical path. I owe almost everything on my pre-medical path to them. It's amazing. Support group as well. Everyone there just tries to help each other up in the pre-med community. I'd say another thing I'm part of is part of this club called Power in Neuroscience. And there we try to get high school students and other people in the community involved in neuroscience and give them opportunities to learn more about what you can go into in neuroscience and what it consists of in undergrad, med school, anatomy labs, that kind of stuff. And I would actually say that tutoring has helped me with my STEM and neuroscience and psych. I feel like every time you teach someone, you learn that material a little bit more. So I love doing that. And I also mentor for MSP in another club, and mentoring has really given me another support group that I can offer support for, and they support me too. So I'd say, yeah, almost everything I'm involved in kind of helps me in my undergrad career so far.
So for me, I'd say that my research has been really helpful. I am a researcher for the CARE and ICU studies. Basically, it's just in the College of Nursing, but even though it's not as science-based, I still get a lot of like behavioral science topics, as well as like, I guess, limited science like chemistry and stuff, but that helps a lot. And then honestly, doing research in any field in the STEM like department is helpful, because then you just see a lot more concepts in real life. And then as well, I'm on the pre-med path, so tutoring has been really helpful with studying the MCAT and stuff, because when I get to tutor OChem and chemistry like repetitively, it gets the concepts more ingrained in my head as well, which is definitely helpful.
So currently this semester I'm not on as many as I used to be, but what I can talk about is club football, and how even though we have 2 to 3 practices a week, we even set a day where it's just study tables, where people show up from the team and we do our homework together. And the coaches, since they're also educators themselves, whether it's they're currently in the grad program or whatever, they're able to come help us answer questions we have of our own. And in addition to that, I'm a Weiler scholar and a JLM scholar, so I have people with an ODI who keep in contact with me to make sure I'm keeping up with my work. Sorry, he's outside. And then outside of that, I think because I'm in the education path, I have a couple programs within there where we just keep each other accountable. We're always messaging within our group meetings like, hey, are you guys doing this? Are you guys doing this? To make sure we're doing our work.
So I know a couple people have touched on this already. So for lack of originality, I'm going to say it anyway. Research, undergraduate research, like please at some point in time do it. It's really, the barrier to entry is pretty low, all things considered. I think a lot of students come in with this idea that they have to be like a junior or a senior, or that they have to have like really, really good grades to do it. You really don't. I remember, so I first started doing undergrad research when I was a sophomore here. And I was in like physics 1251. I went to the professor, and I wasn't even, like, brutally honest, I wasn't even the smartest in the class. I was probably like 50th percentile. All right. But I went in there and I just said like, hey, listen, I'm passionate about this. I read up on your research. I think it's really interesting, and I'd really love to just be a part of this, right? So just be polite and professional and show willingness to work, and they will give you a position. And I think research is great for a couple reasons. Not only does it teach you really the application of what you're learning in the classroom, right? So in the classroom, you have all this theory over here, and with research, you have the application over here. But more importantly, and I think this is especially true for the hard sciences, for like physics and chemistry, is that it's going to show you what you're potentially going to be doing at the end of your undergrad. So you're in the lab, right? You got a job somewhere. Maybe you're in grad school. You're really going to see firsthand what that experience looks like, which is going to help you a lot when it comes to just planning out, like, do I want to go to grad school? Do I want to go to industry? If you're doing research, you're going to know what those paths are going to look like way better than if you're not doing research, which is going to help a lot. One other thing too, this is kind of just like a side note, I guess, is try and just develop a hobby or something to do like outside of STEM. So like I try and work out a lot. And I think that's really important, because sometimes you kind of get burnt out with it, right? Like I love STEM. I think we all do here. But there are some points where you're just like, oh man, if I gotta look at one more equation, like, like my head's gonna blow up, right? So I think it's important, whether that's an instrument, whether it's working out, whether it's painting, whatever it is, have something outside of STEM and work on that and develop that and let that be an outlet to sometimes let you just blow off steam before you get back into things in STEM.
I will take this opportunity to plug again that Wednesday, if you are interested in learning more about getting involved with undergraduate research, we do have an event at 1 o'clock with the Office of Undergraduate Research and some faculty members to talk about getting involved. So just to further highlight what all of our panelists have said, that's a really great opportunity. So those are all of the questions that I had for our panelists. I did see some come in on the chat. However, with my frozen screen, I cannot see them. So India, if you maybe could let me know what questions there are, and then you all can tackle them.
Yeah, so the first question that I saw is from Owen. It says, how do you go about navigating the vast resources OSU provide from ODI tutoring and SI to Mslc to office hours? How do you prioritize which to attend? That's a really good question. So OSU does throw a lot of resources at you, which I think is super great. But I totally know what you mean. I probably get like 4 emails a day telling me different resources that can help me. I'd say just because there are so many resources, I really just kind of keep them in the back of my head, or maybe I'll flag an email that has those resources in it. And then when the time comes when I need to use that resource, I know it's there and ready for me to use. So it's not like right when I see it, I have to start using it right away. The example I'm thinking of right now is I know that OSU offers like wellness coaching. And I only know that because I was a STEM scholar my first year, and they were talking about that in an email, and then they mentioned it again when we were in a meeting. And I was like, oh, I'll never use wellness coaching. Like, what is that? But this week I signed up for wellness coaching because I needed more information on like the pre-med track and like how to tackle that. So yeah, just being able to keep those at my disposal and being able to use them. I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but that's how I decide to use them, just knowing that it's available so I don't get overwhelmed of having to go to all those different things, and just using them when I need to.
I'd say that I do the same thing. Like, I know for office hours, sometimes teachers have one day, sometimes teachers have 3 different days. So in my calendar, I try to put each office hour, and I'm just like, oh, I can possibly go to this. And basically, depending on the week, if I feel like I need that extra help, then I do go to them. And for chemistry lab specifically, I felt like with OChem lab, going to the TA office hours just to talk over the lab reports really helped. So I would definitely say that was a really great resource. But yeah, there are so many out there, but just knowing the ones that you have, and then maybe putting them in your calendar so you remember them.
Yeah, I was gonna go just identify the different types to start. And then, for example, MLC, they normally run 2 different kinds of tutoring. One that's one-on-one tutoring, and one like that's in the big group tutoring. For me personally, I like the one-on-one tutoring because that's gonna allow for more conversation, allow for more understanding what is my issues or what are their issues, and building upon that, rather than when you're in that big group, sometimes you may only get 1 to 2 questions answered in the time you're there because they have so many different students. In addition to that, ODI, we offer that to anybody who's an ODI specifically. So hopefully with us doing that, there's going to be less students for more time for you to engage with us. So just identifying each different one and what exactly are they offered to.
Yeah, so assuming you don't have any kind of scheduling conflict, so and you listed 3 here, right? So you have office hours, ODI, and Math Stats Learning Center, right? So let's say you can attend all of these, no scheduling issues. The first thing I would prioritize, honestly, are office hours for a couple reasons. First off, that professor is probably like the most knowledgeable person in their field, right? Assuming they're a tenured like research faculty professor, right? They are doing the most cutting edge stuff, right? So they're going to have more knowledge than any like under like me, right? Any of us, let's be honest, right? Any YouTube video, anything like that. Also, if you can build up rapport with that professor, that's going to help a lot down the road. They could potentially be a letter writer for you when you get to grad school, right? They could like going back to that research, right? The reason I think I got that research position is because I was in that professor's office hours like day in and day out, right? So they knew I was working hard, they knew I was dedicated to the material. So I would prioritize office hours. Now there's a caveat to that because not all professors are great teachers. I know that kind of, it's a hard truth, but let's be honest, right? Not every professor is really meant to be teaching. So there's sometimes you're going to get a professor that's like, it's like talking to a brick wall, or they're going to just sit there and be like, well, this is easy, why don't you get it? And it's not that useful in terms of just learning something. In that case, I would say prioritize ODI and SI because it's really going to be as close as you're going to get to an office hour experience in terms of like that one-on-one, like let's work through this, right? That really kind of personalized care that you need sometimes when you're tackling tough topics like chemistry or physics or math. And then for me, I'll be honest, I didn't even know Math Stats Learning Center did one-on-one sessions until Nemo just said it. I've always viewed like the Math Stats Center as like the ER of tutoring. Like it is like 2 days before a midterm and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna rush to like Math Stats Learning Center and hope that like I can learn everything on the 2 questions I get to ask the tutor. So I don't know, they're a great service. I've used them extensively. But if I had to choose between those 3 things, I'd probably put that at third.
Sweet. The next question is for the email for the practice exams. I think we can put that in the chat so that people can see that. The next question after that one is, I think I have good study habits, but I feel like I take so much more time than my peers studying. Is there any advice on being more efficient with my time? For me, I would say I also definitely struggled with that in the beginning, just feeling like maybe I was studying the wrong things or it was taking me longer to kind of digest the information. And for me, again, making that checklist and breaking it down into chunks really allowed me to not feel overwhelmed with how much information there was. But specific study habits, I would say after learning each piece of material that maybe I felt was a little bit much or like I had just studied for like hours, I would make practice questions, like maybe 2 pages worth of practice questions for that material. Because if you're able to regurgitate that information into a question format, that means that you really digested the information, you understand it. The professor's not really going to be able to throw big curveballs at you because now you know how to answer the material in a question format because you understand it to the point where you can put it in a question yourself. And one other study habit I would have for being quicker or digesting the information easier is teaching other people. I think being able to teach the information as if you're talking to like your 12-year-old sibling or your like great grandma or something, being able to teach that information that's, maybe so full of like scientific jargon or just really heavy in details, being able to teach that in a kind of layman way is a really good way to make sure that you understand the information. It doesn't feel like you have to keep coming back. And maybe that's what's taking so long is you have to keep coming back to the information. But if you're able to digest it in different ways, you don't have to keep coming back. And I think that really helps save a lot of my time in nowadays.
So personally, I feel like the more studying, the better. But obviously, if you feel like you're being like not as efficient with your time, then I think it was already said, but usually before a midterm, the teacher posts something that has like the main concepts that are going to be on the test. So I just basically go through those individual concepts and write down all the notes that I need for those. And then I try to also make questions and then see if I can answer them. I try to pull like different practice materials. Maybe there's a practice midterm, that type of stuff. But yeah, I feel like if you think you already have good study habits, then, and if it works for you so far, then who really cares if people are spending less time because you're doing good and so I think it's fine.
Yeah, I kind of want to bounce off of that. I think you think you have good study habits, but you spend much more time. That could be possible. I know people who in my stage right now spend an hour to study versus me sometimes who can spend up to 8. But I also remember there were times in my early maths where I didn't have to study maybe a half an hour and I was fine. So having good study habits is the main thing. Don't focus on the time it takes to do those study habits. So for me, the way I did about this is identify how I learned the best, and that's where my study habits were built upon. So if I'm someone who learns best by just rewatching the lectures, that's where I'm going to be studying from. Or in math specifically, if I'm someone who learns by doing the practices instead of doing the formulas, that's where I'm going to study.
Yeah. My mom taught me this a long time ago. I use it every day. I think it's good advice, which is that comparison is the thief of joy, right? So focus on you. So I always say, so ask yourself this, am I hitting my benchmarks, right? So maybe I am studying twice as much as the kid next to me, but I'm hitting the grades I want to do. And am I absorbing the material, right? And are you okay, or are you happy with spending the amount of time you do studying? If you don't mind spending, twice as much as the guy next to you, as long as you're hitting those benchmarks you want to hit, as long as you're absorbing the material, I think you're fine, right? I wouldn't worry too much about it. If the guy over there can do it in half the time and get the same grade, then you just say like, okay, good for him. I'm happy for him, but I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy with how I'm progressing. So that's the key thing. But I would say like Nemo, try and be reflective sometimes. Look back and say like, oh, I spent 2 hours doing whatever this, like note taking, but I didn't really use the notes. Then maybe you say like, okay, I could be more efficient here. I could maybe cut that, or I could change it somehow, right? So maybe, be a little reflective, just see what is maximizing, your absorption of material, and maybe focus on that. You can fine tune it a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you're hitting the benchmarks you want to hit, be happy with that, and don't worry about the people around you so much.
So the next question I saw is from Daniel. It says, any advice for scheduling classes for spring semester? I have heard taking calc and chem same semester can be a lot. Any advice on that sort of thing? This was definitely like, I've gotten this question a lot from my the people I tutor and like my mentees and stuff. What helped me the most, honestly, was going to my advisor and asking that question. People can give you their experience. I think if you're talking about the pre-med path and like all the prereqs that you have to take for that, a lot of people have different experiences because they're able to handle like different workloads than other people. I'm not sure if it was Henry who said that he was taking like physics and calc and one other thing together, but I would never be able to do that. I'm not like proactive enough to be able to take 3 different STEM classes at the same time. For me, I think taking chem and bio was fine because they were so different from each other. It didn't feel like I was having to study the same thing over and over and over again. Another thing that you might come across is if you're taking OChem, you have to take the lab and the class separately for OChem 1 and OChem 2. And a lot of people will tell you to take the lab separate or take it together. And in my experience, I took the lab together because they really follow the same material timeline. So what you're learning in lab is what you're learning in class, what you're learning in class is what you're learning in lab. And for me, that was totally fine. I'm glad that I got it out of the way. And it was almost like a little break. It was easier to understand the material because when it popped up in lab, it was a different way to understand and interact with the material. So that's just one random class thing that you might run into that I would have advice on.
So I think for scheduling classes, it really just depends, like India said, like on what you think you can do. So obviously if someone can schedule like physics, calc, chemistry at the same time, like good for them, but you don't have to do that, right? So I know with pre-med classes, there are a lot of prereqs. You're gonna have to take all the OChem classes, all the chemistry classes, all, calc, all that stuff, right? But I would really talk to your advisor and then also self-reflect and say, so what did I take this semester? Like, was it working? Like, did I take calc and chem? Was that okay? Like, can I add bio? All that stuff. Personally, I took chemistry and biology at the same time, and it wasn't super bad, but I know some people who took like all of their classes separately and they really liked it that way too. So I can only say my experience, but everyone else's is different.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we talked about is just go to your advisor because they're going to be able to give you the best piece of information. Outside of that, the other thing you can do, because I actually got asked this question in one of my SIs a couple weeks back, is just write it out is the best thing too. So that way you can see it on a piece of paper and look at 2 semesters next to each other and go, well, I really don't want to take, and your question was Calc and Chem at the same time. What if you flipped Chem for an English course this semester and moved that Chem to the next semester? Would that work in your plan? And that's where the advisors come in handy specifically, because they will walk you through it semester by semester and explain to you if this will work and how it affect your plan.
Yeah, so I'll give you a kind of very specific and then a broad answer. So I think with just Chem and Calc, assuming you're taking like relatively easy GEs and that's like your total semester there, I think it's doable personally. So I would say you could probably go for it. Obviously, you know, disclaimer, we should all put disclaimers on this. Talk to your advisor, right? Like that's what they go to your advisor, talk to them. They're the experts on this. But from my personal perspective, I think if you're taking easy Gs, it is doable. My kind of just general advice though, for STEM majors, I'm going to say specifically engineering. So 2 of my roommates are engineers. One's Chem-E and one's electrical engineering. There's going to be some point in your 4 to 5 years as an undergrad, you're going to have a semester. I feel like it's inevitable. Maybe someone's magically done this and avoided it, but there is going to be that crunch semester where you are taking like 3 or 4 classes. They're all difficult and it sucks. I had that last year, or last spring actually. I had like 4 like 5,000 level earth science classes and it sucked, right? So I think one thing, the reason why I'm going to encourage you to take this Chem and Calc together is that it's going to build up your endurance or your tolerance for it, right? You're going to learn how to manage multiple stressful courses now early on, where you know it's easier to make mistakes your freshman year than it is your senior year. So that then when later in your semester, you're in that crunch semester where you have to take those 3 or 4 or 5,000 level courses, you're like, hey, you know, I've done this challenge before my freshman year when I did Chem and Calc together, right? So I know how to prioritize my time now. I know how to handle these stressors better, right? So build up that endurance now.
And I do see another question, if we're allowed to answer another one. It says, in biochem or chem courses, any advice for memorizing long chemicals, neurotransmitters, etc.? Do you use abbreviations or other strategies? I have a really quick piece of advice for this one. I use abbreviations all the time, and they are like super vulgar abbreviations. If they're not vulgar, I probably won't remember it, which is terrible and probably inappropriate to say. But if they're not like, maybe have like a curse word in it or 2 or something that'll just like make you laugh when you remember it on the exam, when you see it, you'll laugh and you're like, oh, this is funny. I absolutely remember what it says. And I use that for almost every single exam that I have to take or memorize something. I will come up, even if it's like 20 letters long, I can come up with a saying or a phrase that's stupid and it'll help me remember it every single time.
All right, does anyone else have anything they want to add on that one? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. Like when possible, really try to make phrases and stuff. It really helps on the test, especially if they're funny.
I definitely agree in my experience as well. Sometimes the funnier, the better. Nemo or Henry, anything you want to add?
Well, the only thing I was going to add, like, to this as a whole is don't be afraid to take some of this advice for Solon, because even us 4, I can tell you right now, we're still learning new ways to improve our study and improve our class taking and how we can build upon it ourselves.
All right, are there any other questions that have come through in the chat? If not, then I will thank our panelists very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to share your wisdom. Everyone really, really appreciates it. And thank you all for being here and participating with our technical issues and all of that. You would think by this point we would have figured it out, but we have not. So that's all right. We made it through.
Sorry, real quick. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to put my name.number in here. Anyone who's in attendance, feel free to email me if you have any follow-up questions or if you need advice at any point. So I'll just go ahead. I'll drop that down too.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So last thing I'm going to ask all of you is if you're in attendance today, if you could please give this QR code a quick scan just for some feedback. This is our first year doing Success in STEM Week, and we want to make it, as informative as possible and to fit the needs of what you all are looking for. So give you a second to scan that if you would and complete a brief survey for us. And then we'll also have the link for the survey on our website as well. And then just to remind you of the rest of the events we have coming up this week. So tomorrow is our Industry Insider Chat. Wednesday is we're going to be talking about undergraduate research and how to get involved. And then Thursday is going to be that discussion with current doctoral students in health and medicine to kind of talk to them about their sort of journeys and what advice they might have for all of you. But that concludes our first event of Success in STEM Week. Thank you all very much for attending and engaging. I hope this was helpful and you got some good information out of it. And as I said, all these sessions are being recorded, so you will be able to access all of this later at a later date on our website if you're interested. But that is it. And thank you all for coming and have a great rest of your evening.